What happens when the sun itself abandons the world? In the heart of ancient Japan, there was a time when the world was plunged into an endless, chilling darkness. The sun, the source of life and warmth, had disappeared. This was no mere eclipse, no passing shadow over the land. It was the will of Amaterasu, the radiant goddess of the sun, who had withdrawn from the heavens and hidden herself in a deep, dark cave. Her golden light, the very essence of life, had been extinguished, leaving the world to wither. But why would the goddess of light, who had always watched over the world, turn her back on it? The answer lay in the cruelty of her brother, Susanoo, the god of storms, whose reckless actions had shattered her peace. After his wild, destructive rampage through her sacred lands, Amaterasu's heart was heavy with sorrow and anger. Unable to bear the chaos and destruction, she sealed herself away, leaving the world to fend for itself in the cold, dark void of her absence. As the land descended into disorder, crops withered, seas stilled, and the people despaired under the ever-present night. The other gods, watching from the heavens, were desperate. How could they coax the goddess from her refuge and restore light to a world teetering on the edge of ruin? The challenge seemed insurmountable. The very sun had abandoned, and with it, hope was slipping away. It all started with a bitter quarrel between Amaterasu, the radiant goddess of the sun, and her unpredictable brother, Susanoo, the storm god. For years, their opposing natures had clashed. Amaterasu's calm and light against Susanoo's wild, untamed chaos. But on this fateful day, Susanoo's reckless actions went too far. In a fit of uncontrollable rage, he tore through Amaterasu's sacred rice fields, the lifeblood of the people. His destruction didn't stop there. He slaughtered her livestock, leaving the land barren, and in his final act of defiance, he desecrated her sacred weaving hall, a place of creation and tranquility. Heartbroken and filled with anger at her brother's betrayal, Amaterasu could take no more. She withdrew from the world, retreating to a distant cave, where she sealed herself inside with a massive boulder. In her absence, the world was plunged into complete darkness. The warmth of the sun vanished, and without Amaterasu's light, crops withered, the air turned cold, and despair spread across the land. The gods, witnessing the growing chaos, knew that without Amaterasu, the universe was on the brink of collapse. The balance was shattered, and night reigned eternal. The question remained: how could they convince the sun goddess to return and restore order to their dying world? With Amaterasu hidden away, the world plunged into an endless twilight. The warmth and light that once nurtured the earth had vanished, leaving everything cold and barren. Crops withered in the fields, their leaves brittle and lifeless under the weight of shadow. The oceans, once alive with the sun's golden glow, grew still and silent, as if mourning her absence. Life itself, which had thrived beneath Amaterasu's radiant embrace, began to falter, fading with each passing day. The other gods watched helplessly, their own powers diminished in the face of the growing darkness. Desperation gripped the heavens as the gods convened. Without Amaterasu, the delicate balance of the universe was collapsing. They had to bring her back. But how? Her grief and rage after her brother Susanoo's betrayal had driven her deep into hiding, and the gods knew that pleading with her would not be enough. Every attempt to coax her out had failed, her sorrow too deep, her anger too fierce. They could feel the world teetering on the brink of ruin, time running out. The gods, united in their determination, realized they needed to outwit the sun herself. No small feat. It would take more than words. It would take a plan bold enough to spark her curiosity and clever enough to pull her back into the light. The gods, desperate to restore the world's light, turned to Omoikane, the goddess of wisdom, for a solution. Begging and pleading had failed, and Amaterasu remained locked in her cave, hiding her radiance from the world. But Omoikane had a different plan, one that would not ask for Amaterasu's return, but would trick her into it. The gods set to work, crafting a mirror, polished to such brilliance that it could reflect the full glory of the sun goddess herself. This mirror would be the key. Once the mirror was ready, the gods gathered outside the cave, but instead of solemnity, they began a celebration. Laughter echoed through the air, drums beat in rhythm, and joyful shouts rang out in the cold darkness. It was an unexpected contrast to the shadows that had enveloped the world since Amaterasu's retreat. The world was dying, and yet here were the gods, singing and dancing as if nothing had changed. Inside the cave, Amaterasu stirred. Confusion, and perhaps a spark of jealousy, began to bloom in her heart. What could possibly bring such joy when her light had vanished? How could there be laughter in a world without the sun? Curiosity began to tug at her, a feeling the gods had counted on. She inched closer to the entrance, her hand resting on the massive stone that kept her hidden. The gods' plan was working. Amaterasu, her curiosity piqued by the laughter and celebration outside, cautiously shifted the enormous boulder just enough to glimpse what lay beyond the cave. Her heart raced with confusion and intrigue. How could there be such joy in a world without her light? As the entrance widened, the gods sprang into action. They lifted a gleaming mirror high, reflecting a radiant figure that shimmered with brilliance. Amaterasu, mesmerized by the reflection, gazed into the light, believing she was witnessing a goddess more powerful than herself. The glow was so captivating, so pure, that for the first time since she had retreated into her solitude, Amaterasu felt the pull of the outside world. The gods, sensing her hesitation, cheered louder, their voices echoing through the cave. Each laugh and shout was a carefully crafted piece of the plan, designed to lure the sun goddess out into the open. Slowly, cautiously, Amaterasu stepped further from the shadows, her golden light spilling into the dark world. As the rays of the sun began to spread, the cold grip of darkness loosened, and life stirred once more. The trees, long frozen in shadow, rustled in the soft warmth of her return, and the sky, once heavy with gloom, began to lighten. But the moment was delicate. The gods knew that one wrong move could send her back into hiding, locking the world in darkness again. They held their breath as her full brilliance emerged from the cave, the weight of the world balanced on the edge of her curiosity. As Amaterasu emerged fully from the cave, captivated by the reflection of her own brilliance, the gods acted quickly. Amaterasu, with immense strength, seized the moment and rolled the heavy boulder back into place, sealing the cave shut behind her. There would be no return to the shadows, no retreat back into isolation. The world had waited far too long for her light. For the first time in what seemed like an eternity, the golden rays of Amaterasu stretched across the land. The earth, starved of warmth, breathed in relief. Crops began to stir from their slumber, fields basked in the sun's glow, and the oceans shimmered as if touched by life itself. The gods erupted in celebration. Their bold plan had succeeded. But as Amaterasu's gaze swept across the scene, watching the laughter and joy on the faces of the gods, realization began to set in. She had been deceived, lured out by their clever ruse. The sting of betrayal briefly flickered in her heart, but it quickly faded. Instead of fury, there was calm, a quiet understanding. She saw now, in her absence, how fragile the world had become without her. It wasn't just the gods who needed her. It was everything. The land, the sky, the people. The world had nearly fallen apart in darkness, but her light, her presence, had brought it back to life. For now, she chose not to return to the cave. The world surged with life once more, basking in the warmth of Amaterasu's brilliant light. Fields that had withered in the darkness now bloomed, and the once silent rivers sang again under the sun's golden rays. The gods gathered, their hearts lighter, their spirits lifted by the return of balance. Yet amidst the joy, a quiet tension lingered. Amaterasu stood outside the cave, her gaze falling on her brother Susanoo, the storm god, who had caused so much destruction with his reckless rage, now stood humbled before her, his once proud posture bent with regret. His apology was sincere. The weight of his actions had shattered the reckless pride that had driven him to such chaos. For a moment, the world held its breath. Would Amaterasu, who had retreated from the world in grief, find it in her heart to forgive? Slowly she nodded, but this was no easy absolution. Her eyes, though filled with the soft glow of forgiveness, carried a silent warning. The fragile balance between chaos and order would not be threatened again. Susanoo, understanding this unspoken vow, swore to honor the peace that had been restored. As the sun goddess took her place in the heavens once more, her radiant light washed over the land, promising a new dawn. But beneath that peaceful surface, the gods knew that harmony could be shattered with the slightest misstep. The delicate balance now restored would need careful watching by both gods and mortals alike. With the return of her radiant light, Amaterasu once again took her place in the heavens. the goddess of the sun casting her warm gaze upon the earth. The world, which had teetered on the edge of eternal night, now flourished under her brilliant glow. Fields that had withered in the dark sprang back to life, the oceans shimmered, and the winds carried the joyful sounds of a world reborn. The gods, having faced the threat of everlasting darkness, stood united once more. They had learned that even the divine could be vulnerable, that unity and cleverness could turn the tide when all seemed lost. But Amaterasu's journey wasn't merely about reclaiming her place in the sky. It was a tale of renewal. She had retreated in sorrow, hurt by the chaos her brother had caused, and yet, through the trickery and celebration of the gods, she had found the strength to emerge from the cave. The cave was not just a physical space, but a symbol of the darkness that can consume even the brightest beings. And yet, as she stepped into the light once more, she was stronger, more powerful, her brilliance more captivating than ever before. As the sun rose higher, its rays danced across the land, a reminder that no matter how deep the darkness, the light would always return, triumphant and everlasting.